Jai Gurudev and Hari Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Jai Gurudev. Yeah, let's share our takeaways. Yeah, no problem, Belaji.
Today, so many beautiful verses for the whole day to revel in.
Contemplate.
Yam Shuddham Nirakaram Nirvikalpam Achyutam Aham, that Brahma Evat. Very beautiful today.
Today we started from 32nd, I think, no? 32nd to 36.
Yes, 32nd.
देहान्यत्वान्न मे जन्म जराकार्षलयादयः शब्दादिविषये संगो निरीन्द्रियतया न च. So dehanyatvat, because of its, is it visible to everyone? Let me just make it bigger. Yeah. Dehanyatvat, because of its being other than the body, na, not, may, for me, janma, birth, jara, wrinkling, karsha, senility, layadayaha, death, etc., shabdadi vishayaihi, with sense objects such as sound, etc., sangaha, association, nirindriyataya, because it is without the sense organs, na, not, cha, and. I am other than the body, and so I am free from changes such as birth, wrinkling, senility, death, etc. I have nothing to do with the sense objects such as sound and taste, for I am without the sense organs. Amanastva me jan, amanastva me dukkha, ragadvesha bhayadayaha. Aprano hyamana shubhraha ityadi shruti shasanat. These are all the words of the Shruti. Amanastvat, because of not being the mind. Na, not. May, for me. Dukkha, sorrow. Raga, attachment. Dvesha, malice. Bhayadaya, fear, etc. Apranaha, without breath. He, verily. Amanaha, without mind. Shubhraha, pure. Ityadi, etc. Shruti Shasanat, for the great scripture says so. I am other than the mind, and hence I am free from sorrow, attachment, malice, and fear. For he is without breath and without mind, pure, etc., is the commandment of the great scripture, the Upanishads. So this is where Nana said, if at all we are caught up in either pleasurable or unpleasant situations, that this is what you have to bring yourself back to. Remind yourself that you're amanastvat. I'm not, because I'm not the mind. There is no dukkha, no raga, no attachment, no bhaya even. And apranaha, without breath. Amanaha, without mind. But what am I? Shubhraha. So these are contemplative statements. Nirguno nishkriyo nityo nirvikalpo niranjanaha nirvikaro nirakaro nityamuktosmi nirmalaha. Such a beautiful stanza. I think it's worth memorizing this. Nirgunaha, without attributes. This is attributes is the sattva, rajas, tamo gunas, right? Nirgunaha. Nishkriyaha, without actions. Nityaha, eternal. Nirvikalpaha, without any desire and thought. Niranjanaha, without any dirt. Nirvikaraha, without any change. Nirakaraha, without form. Nityamuktaha, ever liberated. Asmi, I am. Nirmalaha, ever pure. I am without attributes and actions, eternal, without any desire and thought, without any dirt, without any change, without form, ever liberated and ever pure. Anyone wants to share, please unmute and share. I'm just going ahead. If you want to share something, please do. Ahamakashavat sarvam bahiranthargatochyutah sada sarvasama nissango nirmalochalah. Aham, I, akashavat, like space, sarvam, all things, bahihi, without, antaha, within, gataha, fill in, achyutaha, changeless, sada, always, sarvasamaha, same in all, shuddhaha, pure, nissangaha, unattached, nirmalaha, stainless, achalaha, motionless. Like the space, I fill all things within and without, changeless and the same in all, at all times. I am pure, unattached, stainless, and motionless. Nitya Shuddha Vimuktaikam Akhandanandamadvayam Satyam Jnanamanantam Yat Param Brahmahameva Tat. Nitya, eternal, Shuddha, pure, Vimukta, free, Ekam, one, Akhandanandam, indivisible bliss, Advayam, non-dual, Satyam, truth, that is changeless in all the three periods of time, Jnanam, knowledge, Anantam, infinite, Yat Param Brahma, that supreme Brahman, Ahameva, I alone, Tata, that. I am verily that supreme Brahman alone, which is eternal, pure and free. One one indivisible and non-dual, and of the nature of changeless knowledge infinite. So the very fact that all this is being repeated so many times is that we have to keep pounding ourselves, like how that rice is pound, paddy is pound to get the actual rice grain. All those layers of ajnana and all the layers of concepts that we have so deep rooted, they have to be pound time and again, time and again. They're so easy to slip back, and we often slip back into the world and get caught up there in the samsara. Anyone wants to share anything with these shlokas? So the initial takeaway was that examples are given only as an indication, and we should not kind of tease it till the T. Then it would lose its significance. So we just get the import of how we understand. So taking ourselves back to shloka number 25, where we all had that doubt, what is the reflecting surface? So it is the antahkarana. It is Atma gets reflected in the antahkarana. That is enough for us to understand. He stopped at 27 yesterday. I just wanted to read this one para before we go to shloka 28, 27. Is this the self I am? I am illumining my mental conditions. I know I am happy or unhappy, but these are the mental waves that I am illumining. I am the light of consciousness. None of the conditions of the mind is me. This is the constant wisdom of the wise man. I think this is worth putting it down and at least, sticking it up somewhere so we keep reminding ourselves of this. Otherwise, we we often get so entangled in situations and um, in our thoughts and experiences. So I am the light of consciousness. None of the conditions of the mind is me. Does anyone want to chant this shloka so that we go ahead and Rajju sarpavadaatmanam Jivo jnatva bhayam vahet Naham jiva paratmeti Jnatas Jnatasche bhavet. Rajju sarpavat, like a serpent in a rope, Atmanam, oneself, Jivaha, the ego, Jnatva, considering, Bhayam, fear, Vahet, carries or is overcome, Na, not, Aham, I, Jivaha, the individuality or the ego, Paratma, the supreme self, iti thus, Jnataha, having understood, Chet, if, Nirbhayaha, fearless, Bhaved, can be. Just as the person who regards a rope as a snake is overcome by fear, so also one considering oneself as the ego, jiva, is overcome by fear. The egocentric individuality in us regains fearlessness by realizing that it is not a jiva but is itself the supreme soul. So, as long as we have this jiva atma bheda, that is, the other is there, we identify ourselves with our little mind and small mind, we have the bhaya. The moment we realize that we are none other than the Atman, when we're in that Advaita um, experience, then there is absolutely no fear. The superimposition of a snake vision on a rope takes place only when the existence of the rope is not perceived. Once a misapprehension starts, it multiplies itself in its own imaginations into 1,000 baseless notions, and the individual, under his own delusions, suffers the consequences thereof, just as the vision of the snake gives us perceptions of the details of the snake, the pain of its bite, the fear of death that will be caused by the snake on the rope. If the non-apprehension of the self, in the non-apprehension of the self, the misapprehension of the gross physical body, mind, etc., are perceived as real. And in this misunderstanding, the confused ego is born to suffer its own illusory sorrows. We are not the limited individuality as we take ourselves to be. There is a limitless region of experience beyond what is known at present. And this is shut out from us because of our self-centered existence. When the realization of the true nature of the self comes to one, even as mere theoretical knowledge, he who was till then in a perpetual state of fear and sorrow seems to wake up from his own limited existence and rediscovers himself to be the blissful self, which is all pervading and eternal. If and when thereafter there is an outward cognition of any experience, such a Mahatman of self realization cannot but see the same matter equipments of experiences which were before his own, singing the eternal song of life. So this is only this is our predicament in the non-apprehension of the self. The misapprehension of the gross physical body, etc., are perceived as real. And from this misunderstanding is born the confused ego. That is where all our sadhana, all our contemplation has to be, is to remove that confusion from the ego, which is why it is suffering its own illusory sorrows. We are not the limited individuality.
The self-centered existence, shutting all
Yeah,
these experiences which we can really enjoy.
that is why the journey is from being selfish to selfless, from being uh, one to the many, is from Dvaita to Advaita. But this one last paragraph, if and when thereafter there is an outward, when he rediscovers himself to be the blissful self, which is all pervading, then if and when thereafter there is an outward cognition of any experience, such a Mahatman of self-realization cannot but see the same matter equipments which were before his own. His own means the small mind and the small ego, his confused ego, singing the eternal song of life. So he sees it in a totally new perspective. He just sees everything as happening, as everything is that in the, I think in chapter 7, was it? Not chapter 7, chapter 6 it was, where you have this Parshan, Ashnan, Gachan, Swapan, Swashan. So he's actually, although he's experiencing it, he is not the experiencer. He he sees all of them as a witness. Anyone wants to share? So I had this thing of it's going to be dull and bland and all that. It is not going to be so. He would revel in all of that, being unattached. So a man of realization, that state is not going to be one of dull blandness. No, it is scintillating itself, but it's a different kind of scintillating, because there you're not you don't have that I-ness, minus is not there. It just becomes a play for that person. It is like that Rajavatsada, Rajavatada, right? Like the king in the darbar is witnessing all that is happening, the singing, dancing. He's like a king sitting and experiencing and going through all that, being a witness to that. Atma vabhasayatyeko buddhyadinendriyanyapi deepo ghatadivat svatma jadaistairnavabhasyate. Atma, the self, avabhasayati, illumines, ekaha, single, buddhyadini, intellect, etc., indriyani, sense organs, api, also, deepaha, lamp, ghatadivat, like the pots, etc., swatma, itself, jadaihi, inert, taihi, by themselves, na, not, avabhasyate, illumined. Just as a lamp illumines a jar or pot, so also the Atman illumines the mind and the sense organs, etc. These material objects by themselves cannot illumine themselves because they are inert. The street lamp is a silent, unperturbed witness of all that happens under its light, whether it is a marriage procession or a funeral march. The light, unmoved by the feelings of joy or sorrow, sheds its glow on all those that come under it. The postman is unconcerned with the nature and contents of the communication he delivers to the addressee. In fact, we ourselves are unconcerned with the different experiences of a co-passenger when we get into a train or bus, and we never consider his loss or gain as our own, although we may sympathize with his lot and help him. The sorrow is only illumined by us. The self in us is the one illumining factor, the pure awareness which alone illumines both the good and the bad in us at all times. What mind does not comprehend, but what makes the mind cognize, know that to be Brahman and not what people worship, says the Upanishad, and the one power on account of which the physical activities and the mental yearnings and intellectual throbbings become vivid and living for us. The matter combinations may vary in their endless variety, in their strength, vitality, and energy, but the one spirit which through all these different manifestations of matter does not change at all is the one and only glory which gives the glitter of a show to the entire Jagat, a lively show indeed. Yeah. What mind does not comprehend, but what makes the mind cognize, know that to be Brahman and not what people worship. I'll just read the footnote there. Refer Swamiji's discourses on Kenopanishad. Yeah. So it is the one changeless entity which, because of which all the other changes are perceived. स्वबोधेनान्यबोधे च बोधरूपतयात्मनः न दीपस्यान्यदीपे च यथा स्वात्मप्रकाशने. Swabodhe, to know itself, na, not, anya bodhecha, need for other knowledge, bodha rupataya, because its form is knowledge itself, atmanaha, one's own, na, not, deepasya, for a lamp, anya deepecha, need for another lamp, yatha, just as, swatma prakashane, to illumine itself. A lighted lamp does not need another lamp to illumine its light. So too, Atman, which is knowledge itself, needs no other knowledge to know it. Light is necessary to see the furniture in the dark room of a house. But to see the very light which illumines the furniture, do we require any other light? We do not call for the aid of any other light to see the very sun that illumines all the objects in the world, because the sun itself is illumination complete. To understand, realize, and experience the self, the illuminating light in all our experiences, in fact, in all beings at all times, no other light is necessary, because this self alone is the real, and this self alone lights up the knowledge of the entire creation, known and unknown. This self is the all-awareing consciousness absolute. If we remove the furniture, etc., from the presence of the light does not cease to exist. Similarly, even if all the objects in this world, if all our experiences in the waking, dream, and deep sleep states have ended, even then the awareness shall keep on shining as ever before, because the Atman is eternal and self-effulgent. To know this source of all light, no other light is necessary. Yeah. The outer world of objects is illumined as long as I am extrovert. The moment I turn inward and my attention is introvert, I realize that that light alone is the real one which illumines the entire experiences everywhere, not only in my own bosom, but in the entire world of beings. Whatever be the technique which we adopt, we are bound to realize this reality if we faithfully follow the path laid down by the learned sages and experienced seers. Atma is the eternal, Dr. Renu says, Atma is the eternal, changeless, ever-present light, unaffected by all happenings in the mind and witness to all happenings around. Very, very right. So whatever be the technique which we adopt, we are bound to realize this reality if we faithfully follow the path laid down by the learned sages and experienced seers. So this again is the thing, Shraddhavan Labhate Jnanam, isn't it? So we are bound to realize this reality. I think yesterday, day before, we had this doubt, when are we going to realize? Will we realize it? How long will it take? So we are, of course, bound to realize it, no matter what technique we adopt, but provided we faithfully follow With Shraddha, we follow the path laid down by the Shruti, laid down by the Shastra, sages and experiencers. The intellect cannot comprehend the one homogeneous whole because it is not an object of cognition. With a telescope, I cannot see myself. I can only see other objects in front of me and round about me. Similarly, so long as the intellect is there, it is indeed very useful to discriminate, to reason out, to analyze, and to understand the objects and happenings in a field other than the intellect itself. Now, when we try to understand the transcendental truth with that limited intellect in an objective way, the intellect is only trying to achieve the impossible and the impracticable, as the self is the subject that illumines the very intellect itself. This is so beautiful, isn't it? So that is why no matter how much we try to understand Atma or try to uh, kind of comprehend Atma, we are not able to, because it is with our limited intellect. Because that very Atman itself illumines this very intellect with which we are trying to understand and comprehend it. It is not an object of cognition. It is something just to be, to experience. Does anyone want to share anything here? The gross body is an object of experience. The subtle mind is something separate from and subtler than this gross equipment. The intellect is still subtler, and yet even this also is an object experienced by us. When we thus move more and more into the inward chambers in ourselves, we almost reach the subtlest of the thought existence, the intellectual field for the play of our ideas and ideologies, such as I know, I understand, etc. When these thought waves sleep down, when there is nothing for the consciousness to illumine at that rare and sacred moment, the pure consciousness alone remains, illumining itself as a silent street lamp at midnight stands illumining itself. This is so very beautiful. So how it is the inward journey as you go from the gross to the subtle, from the physical body, you're going to the mind and all its thoughts and its perceptions, and then the intellect, and go beyond even that. And you come to the subtlest of those ideologies of I know, I understand. It's that witness consciousness, like yesterday Nana was talking of that sattva guna, that the sattva that is there. When even these thought waves sleep down, when there is nothing for the consciousness to illumine, at that rare and sacred moment, the pure consciousness alone remains, illumining itself. Even that I am thought also kind of dies down, I suppose, there. That is when, just like how the street lamp illumines itself, it is just standing as a single entity. Similarly, pure consciousness will shine through. I suppose that is the moment of self-realization. No, that is all. That would be the end goal. In terms of the familiar analogy of the dreamer is none other than the waker. As the dreamer himself, when he wakes up from his dream, rediscovers himself to be the waker, so too, in the supreme plane of self-awareness and bliss, when all duality has ended therein, when I remain in my own real nature to understand, realize, and experience that bliss of self, Swarupananda, no other illumination is necessary. It is a question of one awakening oneself to that state of God consciousness, the selfhood. Even that said, the term, the phrase I am, I know, also implies a duality there. I know, I am. So even when that dies down, when you're in that state of oneness, the Advaita, that is when therefore in that state you don't need any other illumining factor to illumine yourself. Swarupananda. Yeah. Nishidhya nikhilopadhihi neti neti vakyataha vidyadaikyam mahavakyaihi jivatma paramatmanoho. Nishidhya, after negating, nikhilopadhin, all conditionings, na iti, not this, na iti, not this, iti, thus, vakyataha, from the scriptural statements or commandments, vidyat, no, aikyam, oneness, mahavakyaihi, by the great mahavakyas, jivatma paramatma noho, of the individual soul and the supreme soul. By a process of negation of the conditionings, upadhis, through the help of the scriptural statement, it is not this, it is not this, the oneness of the individual soul and the supreme soul, as indicated by the great Mahavakyas, has to be realized. The Vedic aphorisms, Mahavakyas, are that thou art, that is Tattvam Asi. This Atman is Brahman, that is I am Atma Brahma. Consciousness is Brahman, that is Prajnanam Brahma. And I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. All these point out the non-dual entity between the individual soul, Jiva, and the supreme soul, Atma. Since the reality behind them both is the one Brahman, the Absolute. In this stanza, the way to self-realization by a process of negation of the limiting factors of the individual, that is, the gross, the subtle, and the causal body envelopments, and also of the non-self, anatma, objects as perceived by us in the outer world through these bodies, is indicated. This way leads the seeker on, and he ends in the ultimate realization that the individual soul is in its own real nature nothing but the supreme soul, Paramatman itself. The pure consciousness in me is the absolute reality, and this alone, which is in you and in every other being, is the self everywhere. The Guru imparts this truth that thou art. The seeker after truth, in his burning aspirations to reach the goal, analyzes his own matter vestures, upadhis, and also their corresponding objects in the outer world, the body and the sense objects, the mind and its feelings, and the intellect and its thoughts. With his powers of discrimination, he rejects every one of them as not self. Time, space, and causality are also negated as perceptions of the mind and intellect. In this process of negation, not this, not this, neti, neti. When one has realized that one is no more any one of the non-self vestures, anatma koshas, within or without, the perception and realization of the one eternal truth that persists in every one of the objects becomes in him a living experience as the only permanent in the impermanent. These are beautiful statements to kind of uh, write down and reflect upon. The only impermanent in the only permanent in the impermanent. I'll just read the footnote there. Refers Swamiji's discourses on Kathopanishad. The Mahavakyas are no mere aphorisms, but they are the golden keys which open the gateway to a richer experience, which is beyond words and equally beyond the comprehension of our intellect. That is why it is said it is beyond logic, all of this. We cannot logically come to a conclusion. We can understand, have a concept, but the experience comes beyond logic. It is beyond. By a process of negation of the false and the assertion of the positive truth, one reaches the holy land of the full and pregnant spiritual experience. I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. It's so wonderfully expressed. One, by the process of negation and assertion of the positive truth, one reaches the holy land of the full and pregnant spiritual experience. So it is not a dull and bland thing. It is a full and rich, pregnant spiritual experience. That in all the Mahavakyas, there is an implied suggestion of plurality is a criticism that we generally hear, raised by the Dvaitins against the Shankara philosophy. Because there is some Dvaita in all of the statements, no? Tat Tvam Asi, Aham Brahmasmi. So there are two over there. According to dualists, the very Mahavakya that thou art implies in its two distinct pronouns indicating two different objects. That meaning the unknown goal to be realized, and thou meaning the seeker. And therefore, there are the two aspects, the seeker and the sought, each having a distinctly separate existence. Two different things cannot be one and the same. Therefore, at best, a seeker can only keep a relative relationship with the ideal and can never hope to gain oneness with and be the perfection. This is the argument of the Dvaitins. They say you cannot be Atma. There is a separation between you and the Atma. Whereas Acharya Shankara meets this controversy by indicating that in the ordinary conversation, we often employ this sort of a superficial dualistic declaration to indicate, in essence, a non-dual factor. For example, this is that Gupta. Here, though two pronouns are used as this and that, they indicate one and the same Mr. Gupta. The difference is only in the conditionings around Mr. Gupta. That Mr. Gupta whom you met at Banaras in 1950 as a petty shopkeeper.
Not Dr. Gupta.
Yeah, Dr. Gupta only. We can add
See,
Dr.
my name is in Atma Bodha.
Of course, Dr.
Yeah.
Nemi.
I am now blessed.
Dr. Renu is everywhere. So, so that, so this and that, they indicate the one and the same. We'll make it Dr. Gupta, okay? They indicate the one and the same Dr. Renu Gupta. The difference is only in the conditionings around Dr. Gupta. That Dr. Gupta, whom you met at Banaras in 1950 as a doctor, I'm changing it. I'm changing it to include you, Dr. Renu. Is this Dr. Gupta? Now we meet in the Zoom meeting as a multi-millionaire. The conditioning factors around Dr. Gupta then and now are certainly different. Banaras is not Delhi, or Banaras is not the Zoom meeting. I think I'm confusing everyone, maybe. I don't know. I'm just making it a little, just to include Dr. Renu in this. It is not the Zoom meet. 1950, for instance, is not 1960. A doctor is not a multi-millionaire, but when the conditionings are removed, the individual whom we met in the past in Banaras under certain conditions is the very same individual whom we are meeting today in a different period of time and place and under different conditions. Similarly, this jiva, conditioned by the body, mind and intellect, bound by its own vasanas, tempted by an endless array of objects, going through 1,000 sorrows and despairs, is the same as the unconditioned, infinite, immutable Satchidananda truth. The jiva in its limitations and sorrows can never be the all blissful, unlimited Brahman. But at the same, when the jiva dissociates itself from all its matter embellishments, it gets relieved from its egocentric individuality and comes to experience the truth divine. The term asi indicates this common denominator in both the jiva and the supreme. The infinite conditioned by matter is the jiva. The jiva that, having transcended its equipments, comes to rediscover itself to be nothing other than the immaculate divine. This is so beautiful, isn't it? How Shankaracharya is like, he's such a blessing, such a boon, really. How he has, for every argument that the Dvaitins have put forth, in fact, coming to the point, Nana has shared this beautiful PDF, which I think I will email to all of you who already have been emailed the Mahabharata and all of those. In that, he has given the Prasthanatrayam, all the three things, the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. It's a compilation, actually. In that, Nana said there is one PDF which actually is the argument put forth by the Dvaitins. And he said, if you're not careful, it seems very convincing the way they put forth the arguments, the Dvaitins. It seems quite convincing. You say, yes, this is also true. But Shankaracharya denounces he has an answer for every argument that the Advaitins have put forward, which is what is there in the Brahma Sutras. So you have, it is called the Purva Paksha. It is called Purva Paksha, and what Shankaracharya says. Purva Paksha is all the counter arguments that the Dvaitins have. So I will share that email with all of you. You can, time permitting, you can all go through that. There's a whole wealth of, spiritual knowledge that we have that we just have to dive deeper into. It is said, no, that the whole Vedas, it's like a huge mountain of wealth, and it is only 4 handfuls that Maharshi Vyasa was able to take out, and those are the Vedas. So just imagine what a wealth of knowledge we have. And what we are doing is only a minute, tiny little bit of that. But even that, if we can do it sincerely and do it with faith, it will take us to the path. We are on the path. It will take us to the goal. So does anyone want to share anything in these few shlokas? Yeah, we'll move forward. Avidyakam shariradi drishyam budbudavaksharam etad vilakshanam vidyat aham brahmeti nirmalam. A plus vidyakam. Up to the causal body, shariradi, body, etc., drishyam, perceived objects, budbudavat, as bubbles, ksharam, perishable, etat vilakshanam, separate from all these, vidyat, realized, aham, I, brahma, brahman, iti, thus, nirmalam, pure. The body, etc., up to the causal body. So that is why it is that A plus avidyakam. Avidyakam is the causal body. A implies all the others, in the gross and the subtle body, which are the objects perceived, are as perishable as bubbles. Realize through discrimination that I am the pure Brahman, ever completely separate from all these. The 5 layers of matter explained earlier are all vehicles for the life to express through. The gross body, the subtle body, and the causal bodies are all conditionings. Conditionings is an equipment through which, when energy passes, gets converted into some manifestation, is called the engine or the conditioning. So the gross, subtle, and the causal bodies are all conditionings through which the consciousness, through a process of identification, expresses itself. And what is this identification? To live and act as I am the body is our body identification. During an identification, the subject forgets his own real nature and projects himself on some other person or thing and suffers and enjoys its sorrows and joys, is identification. So through which the consciousness, through a process of identification, expresses itself as an experiencer in the different planes of consciousness. That is the waking, dream, and the dreamless deep sleep state are all called the 3 planes of consciousness, right? So the self identifying with the gross body becomes the waker, who experiences the waking state. And the same self, when shifts its identifications entirely to the subtle body, it becomes the dreamer, now, who was himself the waker before. Now the dreamer lives his dreams and gathers his experiences of the dream world's multiplicity. The self, who has thus played the part of the waker and the dreamer, when it withdraws itself to identify with the causal body, it again acquires to itself the attitude of the sleeper, who enjoys the total negation of the multiple experiences which it enjoyed or suffered during the earlier planes of consciousness, namely the waking and the dream. If the self, in its identifications with the gross, the subtle, and the causal bodies, becomes the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. The self in itself must be something other than its manifestations in these three states. Here, the stanza asserts that it is so, and the seekers are asked to rediscover the self, which is other than the perishable matter envelopments, through a close subjective realization. It is only through discrimination I must undo the evil and realize that what is perceived or brought within the field of my perceptions, feelings, and comprehensions must be different from the perceiver, the sense organs, the feeler, the mind, and the comprehending faculty, the intellect. The divine spark within me is the one illuminator who illumines every one of these objects. Things illumined are always different from the illuminator. Objects recognized by me are then certainly different from the pure self within me, which is the eternal subject. So beautifully explained how the consciousness expresses itself through the different states of consciousness. As a waker in the waking state, as the dreamer. When the waker is subsided, the identification with the gross body is now no longer there. In the dream state, you don't identify with the gross body, but you identify with the subtle body. That is why you have all those, the dream sequence and everything that you're able to create. And then when the dreamer is also, when you go beyond the subtle body, you're existing only in the causal body at that point, you experience deep sleep. So beautifully described by Swamiji. And because none of these wake states are permanent, the waking state is not permanent. You slip into a dream state, and also deep sleep. So these cannot be the truth. The truth is something that remains constant in all the three states of consciousness. So that something is beyond the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. So here the stanza asserts that it is so, and that the seekers are asked to rediscover the self, which is other than the perishable matter envelopments, through a close subjective realization. So that is why the Turiyavastha, that is the divine consciousness state, that is when the pure consciousness shines forth. In Tattvabodh, we learned, the Atma, which shines through in the gross body, is called Vishwa, right? And in the subtle body, it is called Taijasa, I think. And in the causal body, the Karana Sharira, it is called Prajna. So it has got a different name in the gross, subtle, and Karana Shariras. Anyone wants to share or ask, clarify? This is such a beautiful journey, really. Atma Bodh. Dehanyatva me janma jarakarshalayadayaha shabdadi vishayai sango nirindriyatayana cha. Dehanyatvat, because of its being other than the body, na, not, may, for me, janma, birth, jara, wrinkling, karsha, senility, layadaya, death, etc., shabdadi vishayaihi, with sense objects such as sound, sangaha, association, nirindriyat, nirindriyataya, because it is without the sense organs. Na, not, cha, and. I am other than the body, and so I am free from changes such as birth, wrinkling, senility, death, etc. I have nothing to do with the sense objects such as sound and taste, for I am without the sense organs. The idea of an eternal substratum. What is the footnote one? Let me just see that. Yeah. The idea of an eternal substratum for the entire multiple world has already been established. Now, in the following 6 verses, that is 32 to 37, the process of negation of the body, mind, and intellect are given so that we may experience ultimately the self as the sole illuminator of all objects. Because till now, Acharya Shankara has established the fact that the consciousness is the substratum upon which all the other envelopments function. The gross, subtle, and the causal bodies. They are just the reflecting, it is the reflection of the consciousness that makes these things function. So that is done. And in the following verses, it is through a process of negation that they may experience ultimately the self as a sole illuminator. If I am not the body, the merciless destinies through which it is being dragged are also not mine. The endless changes that come to me, birth, growth, decay, disease, and death in my pilgrimage from birth to death, all belong to the physical body, because I, the self, am unborn. When there is no birth for me, there can be no death either. And therefore, no other changes such as growth, senility, etc. can ever come to me. If I mistake any of these to be mine, it is unfortunately the tragic error of the limited ego in me suffering from the body consciousness. I'm just reminded of what Percy G had once shared a long time back about his, I think he had some pain somewhere. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was going through a lot of pain. And he just sat there doing his seva and he did everything. And that pain actually just disappeared. So basically, he was not in the body consciousness. He was in the seva bhav. He was in such a selfless service. So the moment you take away your attention from the body, then all these things that are part of the body envelopment, that is decay, disease, death, that automatically falls off. Than the body, I am unattached to the sense objects as well. If I am not the physical body or the sense organs, what then am I? A zero? A non-entity? I am that consciousness which illumines all this dead world of matter in and around me. The absolute one, the immutable spirit that revels everywhere, which remains ever unattached. Amanastvanname dukkha ragadvesha bhayadayaha aprano hyamana shubhraha ityadi shruti shasanat. I will go through the main thing because we went through the Pratipadartha earlier today. I am other than the mind, and hence I am free from sorrow, attachment, malice, and fear. For He is without breath and without mind, pure, etc., is the commandment of the great scripture, the Upanishads. The mind is that substantial hallucination of terrific force and irresistible might that we feel in ourselves when our thoughts flow. Such powerful terms. Mind is that substantial hallucination of terrific force and irresistible might that we feel in ourselves when our thoughts flow. It is ever changing in its contents and in its moods. Without a thought flow, mind of man does not exist as man even for a moment. All the same, I am not the mind, although I have a mind. My real nature is the self, the changeless and the eternal. The idiosyncrasies of the mind are its own creation. The mind flourishes on thoughts, and thoughts gurgle from my own desire, acquired from my perception and experience of objects extraneous to myself. When I am thus really something other than the mind, and when I realize that it is the illumination of myself that gives the power of awareness to this inert matter, the mind, I cannot but remain perfectly unaffected by the eruptions in that aspect of my physical structure. When I have awakened from my dream, I no longer can mourn for the dream child that died in my dream. I have ceased to identify myself with the mental emotions, and so how can I be any longer a victim of the onslaught of sorrow, fear, etc., which are but the modifications of my mind? I am without a mind. I am pure intelligence itself. I am that higher and imperishable truth which is beyond all explanations and beyond the concept of time, but within the experience of everyone when there is self-realization. Even Shankara must not assert dogmatic assertions without reference to the scriptures. Hence, he quotes his authority, the Upanishads. Isn't this so beautiful? This whole beautiful verse. The mind is that substantial hallucination of terrific force and irresistible might that we feel in ourselves when our thoughts flow. So when you look at the mind like this, you take it out and see it as an object, and you understand that, yes, this is what the mind is, then that slowly that identification with the mind starts kind of getting fainter and fainter. You look at it as an object. Otherwise, you get entangled in its hallucinatory imaginations. Similarly, the dream, when I've awakened from my dream, I no longer can mourn for the dream child that died in my dream. And then I can no longer be a victim of the onslaught of sorrow, fear, etc. Because all these are feelings and emotions which belong to the mind. So I am without a mind. I am pure intelligence. I am that higher and imperishable truth, which is beyond all explanations, because it's beyond the intellect. You cannot understand it with the intellect. And it's also beyond the concept of time. But within the experience of everyone when there is self-realization. So now Shankara quotes the scriptures. Nirguno nishkriyo nityo nirvikalpo niranjanaha nirvikaro nirakaro nityamuktosmi nirmalaha. I am without attributes and actions, eternal, nitya, without any desire and thought, nirvikalpa, without any dirt, niranjana, without any change, nirvikara, without form.
Dr. Dhamla, you have
Yes,
to repeat it for me tomorrow.
come again. I didn't understand.
Repeat tomorrow. I have listened.
You've written, don't feel like leaving the session so profound, but Karma Bhumi is calling. No problem. You can, this will anyway being recorded. You can access the video. You can listen to the last, maybe another 15 minutes, we'll wind up. So maybe you can just play the video and listen to that. Yeah, I know it is so profound, very profound. Jai Gurudev. I am without attributes and actions, eternal, nitya, without any desire and thought, nirvikalpa, without any dirt, niranjana, without any change, nirvikara, without form, nirakara, ever liberated, nitya mukta, ever pure, nirmala. A substance is that which has got physical and chemical properties, gunas. All substances are matter. The spirit is indicated here definitely as something other than matter by the phrase that it is without properties. I, the self, am without properties. Matter has properties and matter is finite. The spirit has no properties. Spirit, the self, is therefore eternal. Desires and thoughts arise from the mind-intellect equipment, and naturally, the self, which is the truth, transcending these two, has none of these characteristic features. By these two preceding terms, the gross body and the subtle body are negated in the Atman. So too, the causal body is negated by the next term. It is dirtless, meaning bereft of all vasanas, immaculate. Such a truth, having all the above four aspects, must be one without any change and also without form. Naturally, it must be ever liberated and ever pure. When I have negatived all the superimposed limitations, the one substratum on which hangs all this world of matter, the one awareness, Asmi, which illumines all thoughts, stands itself gloriously alone, and I rediscover myself to be that. That is the changeless in the changing phenomena, like the gold in the ornaments, the mud in the pots, the immutable spirit. That real self of mine is formless and free, eternal and pure, and without attributes and action. So here when Swamiji talks of having gunirguna, chemical properties, gunas are those that are a matter, properties of matter. Whereas the swabhava of, the swarupa of Atma is Sachidananda. That is the nature. So here there's a distinction between the nature of Atma versus the qualities or the attributes. It is without attributes. Because here it is said, no, the spirit has no property. The matter has properties and matter is finite. The spirit has no properties and therefore it is infinite. This Niranjana is such a beautiful term. It is dirtless, meaning bereft of all vasanas. So he is so beautifully, he is negating the gross, subtle, and the causal bodies. Nirguna is matter, so it is not the gross body. Nirguno, Nishkriyo does not act, doesn't have any actions. So it is not the gross body still. Nirguno, Nishkriyo, Nityo, it's eternal. Nirvikalpo, it does not have any thought modifications, so it is not the subtle body. Niranjanaha, Niranjanaha is negating the causal body. Nirvikaro, Nirakaro, it is not changing. Without form, and it is therefore ever liberated. It's very beautiful how he is going from the gross, subtle, the sukshma, the sthula, sukshma, karana, shariras, negating everything. Aham akashavat sarvam bahirantargatochutaha sada sarvasamashuddho nissango nirmalochalaha. The footnote for the total vasanas constituting the avidya is the causal body. That niranjanaha, that. Yeah. So like the space, I fill all things within and without. Changeless and the same in all, at all times, I am pure, unattached, stainless, and motionless. The assertion of my real nature is continued. Space fills up all things in this world, and even that seemingly endless element of infinite expanse is a mere concept of the mind. That which is beyond time, space, and causality is the self in me, and this cannot be localized at any given part in this body. Also, space, Akasha, allows things to exist in it, but itself never gets contaminated by the things which find their accommodation and existence in space. So too the self, though it allows the perceptions of the non-self in it, it is not contaminated by them. It is like that blue, the crystal, which is a blue cloth kept near a crystal. It is not contaminated. The crystal remains unblemished, although it allows perceptions of the non-self in it. Although that blue cloth gets reflected in its surface and it's as though looks like a blue thing, it is per se not contaminated by that blue color. In the nature of my existence, I am eternal and immutable, and one and the same in all, and equally divine in all beings. I am the pure self, uncontaminated by the layers of matter around me, unattached, ever stainless. I am that all-pervading Brahman. Just reading this makes one feel so pure from within. It is like doing that mantra snan. When you're getting this wisdom down through you, you feel so purified from within. I am the pure self, uncontaminated by the layers of matter around me, unattached, ever stainless. I am that all-pervading Brahman. Nitya Shuddha Vimuktaikam Akhandanandamadvayam Satyam Jnanamanantam Yat Param Brahmahameva Tat. I am verily that supreme Brahman, alone, which is eternal, pure and free, one, indivisible and non-dual, and of the nature of changeless knowledge infinite. The nature of our own self is again and again here repeated by Acharya Shankara, because constant awareness of this is the practice of knowledge, jnanabhyasa. And we have to, as true Vedantins, bring that into our own personal experience. For purposes of meditations, we need these stanzas. To contemplate over them and to feel them sincerely is the direct path to experience it. To contemplate over them and to feel them sincerely is the direct path to experience it. Those alone who constantly practice the control of the mind and retreat inch by inch from the dark despairs of the matter envelopments can grow more and more in their spiritual strength. This brings the glow of the God consciousness deep into their hearts, and when the ignorance which causes the veiling of the truth and the agitations of the mind has gradually weakened, and when there is no more the eruption of the self-centered egoistic thoughts of passions and sense impulses, we are awakened to the knowledge of the self. This glory in us is ever pure, eternal, and indivisible as previously stated. And this supreme existence is truth, knowledge, absolute. Satyam, Jnanam, Anandam. This is beyond beautiful, actually. Swami Chinmayananda is giving us the route map over here as to how and when, how we will reach that state of self-rediscovery. So when the ignorance which causes the veiling of truth, the agitations of the mind is gradually weakened, and when there is no more the eruption of the self-centered egoistic thoughts of passions and self-impulses, we are awakened to the knowledge of the self. How does this happen? It is when we constantly do this, constantly practice the control of the mind and retreat inch by inch from the dark despairs of the matter envelopments. It's like how you peel an onion, no? You keep peeling off all these matter envelopments, and then you come to the center core. So, can grow more and more in their spiritual strength. This brings the glow of the God consciousness deep into their hearts. And when the ignorance which causes the veiling of truth and the agitations of the mind is gradually weakened, there is no more eruption of the self-centered egoistic thoughts. Then we are awakened to the knowledge of the self. Very beautiful. Anyone wants to share anything? I think today we have come abreast Nana's. So tomorrow we will start 37 and we'll be in touch with that. Yeah. So anyone wants to share anything final before we leave this? I think it's nice to just close our eyes and be in that beautiful state for a while and then close the Manana. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Om
Wishing everyone happy. Sorry.
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.
Wishing everyone very happy Diwali.
Yeah, happy Diwali. Let the
Dhanyavad.
light of
Happy Diwali.
knowledge light up in each one of our hearts.